Back on the MSG 150 at home, presented by Chase, Bill Pito, Cam Smith, and Alan Hahn. And it is great to see Tiki Barber, former Giant and co-host of the Tiki and Tierney Show on CBS Sports Radio from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And Tiki, it is clear you are in the business. You have the best setup of any guest we've had all summer.
It took us a long time to get it set up like this, but we didn't miss a beat once the coronavirus took over New York City. We were just on radio for about 3 weeks, just through the Comrex, as I'm sure most people are familiar in the radio industry. And then we got Zoom meetings going, and I got lighting, and I got a computer, I got a studio mic. I feel like, I could work from home for the rest of my career here, I think.
You look good and sound good. Tell us about your thoughts on the NFL offseason and how you think things are going to progress.
Yeah, it's been an odd offseason for all the sports, but the NFL has been fortunate because they're not in season, so they haven't had to deal with any of the shutdowns or the potential spread of the virus, and they're operating as business as usual. But obviously, we got a big twist and a turn in a social way a few weeks ago with the George Floyd murder and the rebirth of this protest movement, this protest initiative that was started by Colin Kaepernick 4 years ago. And so for a long time, we felt like this offseason for the NFL is normal, and then all of a sudden it changed, and it feels like the tenor of the National Football League is different going into 2020, and it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out from an on-field standpoint, obviously the X's and O's, but also from a social standpoint where all these players are now feeling empowered to stand up for what they believe is right.
Tiki, how important then was it to hear Roger Goodell say those words, Black Lives Matter, to walk back some things that happened a couple of years ago, and even to hear him talking about Colin Kaepernick as well?
Yeah, it was imperative. And look, we knew that history was going to judge the NFL incorrectly on how they handled the Colin Kaepernick situation 4 years ago and the fact that he couldn't get back into the league. And, because of the world that we're living in, where everybody's stuck at home, everybody's consuming digital media, they're seeing and diving into rabbit holes about everything that's going on. And then we see these series of incidents. One was vigilante justice with Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, and then we get Breonna Taylor, and then obviously George Floyd. It reignited a movement, this Black Lives movement that has always been under the surface there, but it came to the forefront because we were all paying attention. And the NFL players, you got to give them a ton of credit, particularly some of the black quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson and the MVP of the Super Bowl and of the season, Pat Mahomes, putting the NFL and Roger Goodell on blast. And you got to give Roger credit because he responded and said exactly what the players wanted to hear, and said from his lips, Black Lives Matter. It changed the narrative around Colin Kaepernick and this protest movement that has existed for the last 4 years, kind of under the surface in the NFL, but now it's certainly on the forefront.
Tiki, I would love to continue this conversation, but let's switch it over to football. And you speaking of the offseason, and more specifically with the Giants and what they did in the offseason with the hiring of your former teammate, Jason Garrett.
Yeah, I love JG.
What do you think the impact will be that Jason Garrett will have on Saquon Barkley, whose numbers dipped a little bit last year just because of the ankle injury that he dealt with,
right,
but he still rushed for over 1,000 yards. What do you think his impact will be on Saquon, but also that Giants offense?
Yeah, well, let's not get it twisted. Saquon's a special player, man. He's just physically adept. He's smart. He's willing to learn. And I think with Jason now at the helm of this offense, you're going to get one experience in using diverse offenses. And let's not forget that you got to go all the way back to 2000 when Coach Pope, who actually was an assistant coach for Jason for a couple of years in Dallas, was doing all of that misdirection stuff that I was a part of. Going out the left side, but making everybody think you're going right, and using your running back in diverse ways. Jason has so much depth in his game planning, his playbook. And so I think we're going to see a bunch of that, especially with Daniel Jones being such a young second-year player. You don't want to put too much on his plate, especially when you have a revamped offensive line in a sense, and a special player in the backfield. I love what Jason's going to potentially bring here, and I love the fact that Coach Judge hired him because it gives an experience experienced head coach, even though he's not the head coach now, underneath inexperienced coordinator who is now jumping into his first role as a head coach. I'm excited for the Giants this year. They may rebound faster than a lot of people expect. They addressed certain things in free agency, particularly the linebacker position, and then obviously the draft went well also. So I think there's good things to look for the Giants this year, even if there is uncertainty because the whole staff is new and the whole system is going to be new.
Garrett's impact on Daniel Jones will be interesting as well, as now it's a second coach for him in his second season. But
yeah,
with young quarterbacks, a lot of times sometimes you're giving the ball up. Normally it's throwing to the other team, but for Daniel Jones, it's been fumbles. He's had that issue with ball security, and it's something that you dealt with early in your career and were able to overcome it.
Yeah.
So if you had some advice to give him and some things maybe you've seen, what would it be?
Yeah, it's not that much of a parallel because I was fumbling because I was getting the crap knocked out of me. He's fumbling because he's not aware of the pocket collapsing around him, and that's just a timing thing. The one parallel though is awareness, as I just mentioned. It took me a while, but Gerald Ingram, my former running back coach under Tom Coughlin, just taught me to. Whenever I was going into contact, didn't matter if I was, 5 yards downfield, in the backfield, or 40 yards downfield. If I felt contact, to wrap myself up, pull the ball in tight, cover my on-hand ball with my offhand, and go to the ground like this. It's an awareness thing. It's a perception of what's around you. And Daniel needs to learn that when the pocket starts to collapse, you automatically got to put that second hand on the football. Even if you're still looking to throw, you got to put that second hand on the football. And once that he develops that awareness, and it'll come with time, I think that fumbling issue will go away. The bigger question is how much of a leader is he going to continue to evolve in? I was down at that Tampa game, his first start last year, and it was just it was inspiring. It was awesome to see his athleticism, his ability to not get flustered under pressure. He reminded me so much of Eli when Eli was a young player with the New York Giants, and he started to get it. I think these young players are getting it much faster than they did a decade and a half ago.
So, Tiki, you retired as the Giants' all-time leading rusher. You're still the Giants' all-time leading rusher, but you called it quits the year before the Giants won the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. You had a Hall of Fame-like career, but haven't been able to get into the Hall yet. Do you think retiring when you did has hurt your chances?
Maybe because it's just a numbers game, and you end up putting. If I would have played another season, I would have had 11,000 yard rushing. Maybe I'd be 2 or 3 ticks higher on the all-time rushing list. Receiving yards, I'm over 5,000 as well. I think the NFL Hall of Fame is much more about a narrative than it is about numbers or accomplishments, especially for a non-quarterback. So for a coach or for a quarterback, did you win a Super Bowl? Matters. I think there's going to be a couple like Phillip Rivers that may get in without having won a Super Bowl, but winning matters for coaches and quarterbacks. For other position players, it's about what's the conversation, like what's the narrative about you. One of them that's been thrown out there is, well, can you write the history of the NFL without this guy? And maybe you could without me, and maybe you couldn't. But you couldn't write the history of the New York Giants without me. And so do I think about it? Sometimes, but do I worry about it? No. I played my career the way that I wanted to. I left it when I wanted to because I physically didn't think I could do it anymore. I could have hung on for a couple of years, but I didn't want to play it in a compromised fashion. And so I walked away thinking that the Giants weren't that close to a Super Bowl, and timing can be a bitch sometimes, and we all know what happened. But I'm proud of those guys, and I'm proud of my career. And I guess the narrative, whether it's constructed or not, will take care of itself.
All right, Tiki, with that said, you talk about narratives, especially with quarterbacks. Did they win or did they not win? One of your old teammates, Eli Manning, there's been a lot of talk about him. Should he be in the Hall? Should he not be in the Hall?
Yeah, there's not even
your thoughts on that. Should Eli be in the Hall?
Cam, it's not even a question. I mean, he's got 2 Super Bowl championships, 2 Super Bowl MVPs. He's top 10 in passing yards and touchdowns. The statistics are there. And you go back to the narrative. it's like storybook. You know what I mean? The not the then rival, but the coming rival, the New England Patriots, are having the most perfect season imaginable. You know, more games than the Miami Dolphins had won in the '70s, and you know, they get to the Super Bowl. It's a foregone conclusion that they're going to beat the Giants, who just barely got into the playoffs that season. And we know what happened. The Giants defense, led by Strahan and Osi and those guys, wreaked havoc on Tom Brady, and Eli did the miraculous, or at least David Tyree via Eli did the miraculous and set up that touchdown to Plexico Burress that ultimately got them the win. It's a narrative that doesn't seem real, and Eli was the orchestrator of it. And let's not forget, he was damn near perfect in the postseason, right? And no matter what you want to say about the regular season faults of Eli, in the postseason, he always showed up. And I think that to me, and I think to a lot of people, that'll be the deciding factor on whether or not he's a Hall of Famer.